Hey, legends, it's Leslie here again. And this is a bit of a recap on the 2026 Ultra Trail Australia 100 miles, which is the second time I've done this race. And wow, yeah. So I know a few of you like my blogs and my writing, but I've kind of decided that these video things a little bit more authentic, right? Because these days, how do you know if AI wrote something or if someone actually wrote something? At least you know, I think, from those that have met me in the wild, so to speak, that this is me, right? This is me just sharing what I've been through, what I've learned, hopefully. And yeah, we'll go from there. So let's do this. UTA Miler. Wow, this is the second running of it, the second time I've done it. And yes, I am that nut job that signed up twice. So I did finish in 2025 and 2026, I actually ran 2.5 hours faster. So I completed the race 2.5 hours faster. And the first thing out the back is that people often ask me, okay, what did I do different? Now, the really important thing here is that I didn't do anything different. And I don't mean that in like a flippant, irrelevant way. How I mean this is that I got faster by just continuing to do what I had been doing, like trusting my plan and stacking bricks and getting the boring consistency done. No flashy, weird workouts, nothing different, like not trying to do much more than power hike my long runs. And this is where I got to. So the other thing I want to flag here is that when I signing up for the second time, just because I did it once didn't mean that second time round was any less daunting, because you have in the back of your head, and I know I did, that I wanted to show people in a way that first time round wasn't a fluke. And I wanted to do this thing better. Personal excellence, I guess, is where I was coming from. So everything between the 2025 and the 2026 miler outings, every bit of training in between was all about the 2026 UTA mile. So whether that be running Sydney Marathon, running COSI 100, all of those training efforts, all of those race efforts were leading me to here, because I literally have one goal race, and that goal race is the miler. And so everything else, even though it might seem like I'm doing X, Y, and Z, everything else is about the miler. So I was very, very focused, and I guess I needed to be, because doing a PhD at the same time means that I could easily spend time in different avenues of life, whether it be family, work, running. So having very clear specified goals and a lot of time for each means that I can tackle each. It's not an accident gets done, if that makes sense. So, yeah, wow. I'm there sitting in the bus going to the start line, freaking out just as much as I did last year. Got a bit quiet. I was fortunate I had both my pacers and both my crew come on the bus to the start line at Govets this year. So my crew is my roomie, Ali, my fabulous husband, Kilner, and my fabulous pacers, Simon and Kay. Now, I could not have done this without them, because, right, my crew are there, and so I don't need to think much. I can just express what I need. They can help me there, and then we move on. And then, of course, my terrific pacers, they were my motivators and my distractors. And they knew exactly when to get me talking. They knew exactly when to let me be quiet. And we just got the steps done. That last 70K would have been torture without them. And I'll go into a little bit more detail then. We also learnt a lot from last year in terms of logistics, like location of accommodation, to minimise traffic issues and minimise needing to take shuttle buses and things like that. And really getting our head around parking situations at different checkpoints, road closures, so that we knew in advance where the challenges would be, and we could deal with that. So that went from the race side, but also to the logistics side. Because the one thing I need to highlight here, and I want to overarch, running 100 miles is hard. Running 5Ks is hard, guys, but running 100 miles is hard. And the little bit of the attitude here was me going, oh, is this hard? This is hard. And I was expressing that a bit. And I had awesome crew and pacers that were like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. They were there for me. We weren't denying the fact, but we're like, well, we keep going. And just because we express it as feeling hard, and just because I as a runner was expressing myself as struggling with it feeling hard, didn't mean we were going to stop. But sometimes I just needed to let it out. And so they were really gracious with that. But when we do hard things as runners, and I think as female runners, it's really important, and I'm going to put my hand up here to say, we do not have to do the hard things on our own. It's totally okay to ask for as much help as I need. And I want you to get that message, because if I attempted to do this without pacers or without my crew, I would continue to lose time and I may not meet the cutoff. Just saying. I don't need to go into this with the mindset, oh, I'm going to inconvenience people if I ask for help. If I ask for help and they willingly say yes, I'm going to use that, for want of a better word, but I'm going to embrace that assistance, right? Because it is a team sport. Ultra running is a team sport. More so, like once you go beyond that marathon distance, ultra running is absolutely a team sport, whether it's your crew and your pacers or whether it's the other ultra runners out there. I just wanted to highlight that. One thing that also worked, I think, in my favour is that the rain was a bit different this year versus last. And also, like, yay for national parks. They have done so much work on that section from Sewerage Works to the base of Furber that the mud situation was completely different. It's not to say we didn't have some slippery bits, but that changed a lot. And I think I was able to really push in that last section of the race more so than the year prior, because it was less slippery, which was great. The mud was, however, in different places. For example, between Goverts Creek and Lockleys, it had been raining in days prior, and when it's raining a lot in that area, it turns into effectively a waterfall. And so what that meant is that even though it wasn't the waterfall when we got there, yay, it was this thick clay type mud that really stuck to your shoes, and was actually a bit treacherous going up. But can't complain, because I was actually 43 minutes faster this year than last year between Perry's Look Down and Fortress Ridge. So I really can't complain about the mud there too much, although I did notice it and it did soak a bit. So shall we go section by section, guys? So for those that wanted kind of a general summary, there you had it. Now I'm going to just dive in a little bit more into section by section. So let's talk the course, because I think this, in the end, it can also be a bit of a course recce for those potentially doing it in coming years. So this year we started at Goverts Leap instead of Evans Lookout, which was great. It meant we could spread out more. It just also meant that that first loop was about 3K longer, which is fine. But I was initially worried in training getting to Fortress Ridge, because the cutoff to Fortress Ridge had stayed the same, on paper, for basically most of the training block. But closer to race day, that was revised and they popped in an extra 20 minutes there. I thought that was important because even though the overall distance of the race was relatively close to last year, in that first 30 odd K, you did have a little bit more distance to play with because of that different start point. That's all. So I think that was good just in terms of not having as much of a mind stress, because last year that was a pinch point and I thought, oh, this is going to be worse of a pinch point, even if I am potentially doing a little bit better. But in the end, that wasn't needed because, like, as I mentioned, I actually got into Fortress Ridge way ahead. Now, so we left Govetts, we do a little bit of a road out and back or around, and then we hit the single track. Basically, from when we started to descend in the single track, it was conga line-ish for pretty much a good chunk of that. And then when we turned onto the Braeside Walk, it was absolutely a conga line. I wasn't super concerned because my mindset in this section is that this is good. This is holding me back a bit because you don't want to go too hard too soon, particularly when you've got 100 miles to go. But the good thing is, the other reason I wasn't too stressed about it is that I knew that that single track didn't go too far and that we had some fire trail after that. So once we did hit that open fire trail after the Braeside, I did get my motoring running legs along and I did sort of push between getting out of that single track and then the descent into the Grand Canyon itself, because I knew that I did have a bit of a strength, and my strength is actually the descents. And so where I didn't want to get stuck is in conga lines going downstairs, because my weakness is actually the climbs. And so if I get stuck in a conga line going down, I actually end up losing a lot of time because I can't make it up on the other side, whereas other people might have their strengths in the climb. The great thing about this race this year was that it was really easy to kind of get past people and just have that general conversation. It was really lovely, actually, to have that general conversation. Hey, I'm better on the descents than the climbs. They go, yeah, I'm better on the climbs. And so we would have that little dance. But what was really lovely this year is that that conversation was really open and chatty, and it made that sense of camaraderie. That was new this year, and like for me, yeah, I saw that as a huge win, which was fabulous. And then after that, we got back to Govett, so it was a bit of a loop and out and back, all great. Now coming between Grand Canyon, so from Evans Lookout back to Govetts, there's some runnable single trails, some bits of climb. My left calf twinged and I'm like freaking out because I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? It's early on. Anyway, I slowed down a bit and I protected my calf. And when I got into Govetts Leap, my crew were there, which was awesome. I basically said, hey, I need to get some sports rub, my ice blue stick that I had in my pack, and I needed to apply that to my calves because I knew that my calves needed support. So which we did. I also then swap out my water bottle. So the great thing is I've got like double sets, and so I'm not like refilling bottles, so I don't have to fiddle around with refilling. I'm literally just swapping bottles in and out. Now, something I didn't pick up as a red flag at this point was that I went through really only 500 mils of water in that 12 Ks, which I really should have gone through closer to a litre. I was also grabbing the actual plain water that my crew had for me as well, because in my bottles I have electrolytes. Now, the reason this is a red flag is that if I'm not drinking enough early on, this may cause problems. It was also a red flag because, as I discovered later on, and I'll come into a little bit more detail when I get to the relevant section, it meant that I didn't want the taste of that salty electrolyte. And so that was a bit of a red flag to say that if I don't want to take stuff by mouth, that could cause problems later in the race, right? Because it's very early on to stop wanting to take things in. Wasn't an issue by this point, though. I was using my jelly beans. And for those that don't know me as well, if you're watching this for the first time, I'm a keto runner. So I predominantly rely on my fat burning ability, plus I top up my blood sugar with jelly beans. So at this point, whilst I hadn't been drinking enough, I was still topping up my blood sugars. It was also early enough on in the race that I wouldn't actually, from my point of view, notice a difference because I'm used to doing 4, 5, 6 hours of running fasted. So this is why certain things didn't show as red flags early on. It's also a bit of an advantage of being keto in some respects, I think, on retrospect. So after that, I headed out to Perry. So that is not far. It's about an hour. And I actually clocked in getting to Perry's pretty much on time. Again, I went through another 500 ml of water. So I was able to get a little bit extra in. But I used the bathroom, topped up, all that jazz. So in many instances, like my 2 hours faster was predominantly made up by just ticking off small amounts of time on each leg. At this point, I hadn't come significantly ahead. I think I was maybe just a couple of minutes. So I would class that as being on track. But examples of being those couple minutes ahead. So, for example, just between like the river to Lochley's Climb, I made 4 minutes there. Things like Bruce's Walk, I had, 12 seconds difference to plan, right? So it really wasn't huge. I was just making up small amounts of time. I did have a big chunk that I did pick up between Perry's to Fortress, though. So after you leave Perry's Look Down, you literally have hairy down, crazy up. And the down is not much faster than the up, to be honest, for me. It's pretty similar. But I was able to maintain my consistency and just keep moving. And I got into Lock's Pylon, and there's the first time we're seeing a marshal in ages. And I'm like looking at my watch going, is it only 11 o'clock? Because I'm like, this is like, what? It didn't make sense. And so they assured me, and I'm like, okay, I'm happy with this. I'm going to keep going. And so then I was able to just keep moving and motoring along the technical single track till we got to Mount Hay Road. And then, as always, the plan is when I get to Fire Trail, so something like Mount Hay Road, is to walk, run, and just what I call motoring. Can't necessarily run the whole way, but just really focus on moving to my max. And that's usually a run walk strategy to get to the next checkpoint. And again, I got in to Fortress Ridge 43 minutes ahead of plan, which was pretty cool. I was particularly grateful. And out of that 2 hours, I've made up 43 minutes right there. Bam. And that was nothing crazy, just consistency. So I was super pleased about that. That is a non-crude aid station, so it's literally toilet, refill, off we go. Just chatting to people on the out and back. I love that section where you go out to Fortress Ridge and get some photos taken. Then you come back because you're seeing other runners, which is really lovely for lifting spirits. And then you end up hitting Fire Trail again. So you've got about 5K of Fire Trail before you get to Bruce's Walk. And that strategy, again, was just walk, run, walk, run. I'm not feeling great at this point. I'm starting to get some negative thoughts come in, but I'm like, I can do this. I can keep pushing. Time-wise, I'm like, okay, this is fine. We'll keep going. So that is the plan. By the time I got to Bruce's Walk, it was starting to rain a bit. And so whilst I was saying that we didn't have heaps more rain this year than last year, what I personally noticed is in that section between Perry's and Hydro is that we had some like little downpours where I got a bit more wet than I did last year. I think the crew noticed more rain last year, but I noticed more rain this year. So it's interesting, but there was definitely less mud. On Bruce's Walk, the event crew do a fabulous job of putting some different little footbridges, little bits of wood to help you get up the really steep and slippery sections, which helps. But it's the kind of trail where it goes up, down, and it's really gnarly. And so even with those added supports, I guess I still end up on my butt sliding down the mud. So I rock up out of the other end of Bruce's Walk, which was pretty much the difference between this year and last year on Bruce's Walk was, I think, 12 seconds. But I do it much faster in the race because of the supports that the crew put in. But I was like, I'm filthy, I'm disgusting. And I'm like, oh. So that point, I'm messaging my crew saying, hey, I want to change my clothes at Narrowneck because that's where I was going to see them. And I put it in the wrong WhatsApp group, didn't I? I put it in the wrong WhatsApp group. Anywho, they sorted that out because fortunately my husband Kilner was in both WhatsApp groups and was able to convey the message. So I got to Hydro pretty much on plan. So I guess, and when I say on plan, so I'm still 43 minutes ahead in total, right? So that next section was pretty much, I still took, even though I was ahead at Fortress, I took the allotted time between Fortress and Hydro, which was great. I got into there. I knew that was not going to be a crewed station from me based on my previous knowledge. I knew I only needed crew at either Hydro or Narrowneck, and I chose Narrowneck because it splits them more evenly for me. Then at that point, I saw people I knew, which was fabulous. I got Michael, he was cheering me in, which was great. Interestingly, I got some like side eye and some like weird looks of surprise from other people that knew me. And I'm like, okay, it's a bit weird. Anyway, I just kept going. Again, bathroom break. I'm not going to shy away from talking about that. So bathroom break, and I actually grabbed some water in my flask and a coffee, and then I literally headed straight back out. So I literally turned around at Hydro in like 4 minutes because I knew exactly what I was going to do. And I knew that I was going to grab that coffee. So I wanted a warm drink. It's the end of the day. And walk that next, there's a bit of footpath and so forth, walk and drink that coffee on the go so I can keep moving. In the end, I actually did Hydro to Narrowneck 15 minutes faster than planned, which was excellent. I was super pleased at being able to come into both Hydro and Narrowneck earlier because it meant that I did the single track between Nellies and Narrowneck in the daylight, which I think is a big part of why that is 15 minutes faster, because doing some technical single track in the dark naturally slows me down. So at Narrowneck, I took some time, complete change of clothes, refueled because it had been over 9 hours since I'd seen my crew, and I knew it was going to be another 8.5 till I'd see them again. Change of clothes, hugs, yay, a bit of food. I had some potato. At this point, I still hadn't cleared about my whole drinking and scenario, but I was offered some potato. I'm like, they look great. I'm going to take that in because when I'm running, I don't get super strict about what I'm eating. I must admit, I do avoid some bread and gluten type products, but that's mainly because my tummy's not used to it. So I don't want to give it something that might upset it, not because I'm necessarily going, oh, I can't have bread. It's more about minimizing risk to my gut, which I think is important. So after we leave the Narrowneck Lookout, we actually head out along the Narrowneck Plateau and then to Taros. And so that's about 12K of fire trail. So that strategy there, so it's dark. which is fine. But we go down and it's literally up, down, up, down, up, down. So hike the ups, run the downs. By this point, because I've been applying the ice blue rub to my calves, they had stopped being an issue, which it's like, yay, winning there. So I wasn't having to modify my gait anymore. It wasn't being an issue. I wasn't having to hold back. So I was quite pleased. Got to the end of Narrowneck. They had an aid station there this year, just before Taros. Again, refilled water, bathroom, off I went. Now, this next bit I was super keen on because I think it's particularly cool here, is that they put actual ladders in Taros, so I didn't have to do the Wallaby track. Now, I normally do the Wallaby track because I'm a little bit freaked about heights and I don't like to climb down the side of a cliff in the dark, just saying. But because the ladders were there and because there were people there literally to talk you through it, it's literally straight to the ladder, turn around, power down. When I say power down, it's just one step at a time. So that was super, super efficient. Much better than the Wallaby track because there had been rain, it would have been a bit slippery and hairy. So I'm very pleased. Then the next thing was literally about getting to Foggy Knob. So you've got then a combination of single track, you've got then some fire trail, and so you've got a mixture of climbing and a fair bit of descent on some technical single trail, and then ups and downs, rolling fire trail with some climbing to get to Foggy Knob. So I was just pleased with that whole section, to be honest. I was starting to try and eat some of my nuts and salami and cheese, and I had some, but by this point I was starting to go, you know what, I don't really like the taste of this anymore. This is a bit weird. I'm like, okay, stick with the jelly beans. So I did that. Getting into Foggy Knob, I was looking for something else to eat at that point. Nothing appealed, which is a bit of a problem, but I did see some Coke, good old magic brown liquid. And because I hadn't been eating, I was like, okay, I need to get something into me more than just my jelly beans. So I had a small cup of Coke there, which helped. The soles of my feet were also starting to hurt. So I spent some time with medical to put some tape, because last year I got blisters that were like the entire bottom of my foot. And so I wanted to avoid that. And so I put some tape there for some hot spots. And then off I went to Iron Pot. Now, Iron Pot, technical steep climb. This was literally a matter of just getting the work done. And I was attempting to keep getting my jelly beans in and keep drinking as much as I could along the way. That was my priority. It was dark. At this point, I was starting to overtake some people that were struggling in the middle of the night. This is the middle of the night, so it's after, so we're talking what, 11 p.m. plus, and at this point the brain's trying to really convince you that you don't want to be doing this anymore, because like, you should be going to bed, mate. So it is feeling freaking hard at this point, but in my head I'm like, I've just got to get to the next crude point, which is at 6 foot / Megalong. So off I keep going. After you get to Iron Pot, there's a real technical down. Again, it's a bit slippery. So this is where like 1K takes you 23 minutes on a descent. Because it's middle of the night, you're tired, it's slippery, it's steep, all of that jazz. I'm changing head torch batteries at this point. There's about 3 different creek crossings after that till you get to Megalong Road. And then so you get to Megalong Road and you're like, yes. And then you've got like the climb, and then there's a bit of descent into the aid station. I never am able to really run that descent. For some reason, I'm always buggered. It's the middle of the night. On race day, I do it much slower. It's interesting because a lot of other segments I do in training slower and race day faster, but not that particular segment. And then we actually take off the side and we're going through some paddock. And I'm like, man, just get me to the aid station the most direct way. But it feels so convoluted. Very excited at this point to get into the aid station because I picked up my pacer, Simon. Now, I got my feet redone because I wasn't happy with the tape. And then bathroom. And hey, guys, this might be too much information, but do you think I care? No. My period arrived. So for the last 70K of the race, I'm also dealing with Lady Flo. Yay! Fortunately, can I just say yay for UTA? They have fabulous support, right? They've got fabulous support. There's like products that actually support you through that time of the month that they have available. And so it's like, yay. I was really pleased. And then obviously I'm like alerting crew chief Ali that this is what's going on so that she knew that I could be prepared for each subsequent aid station stop, because between getting to Megalong and the finish, I'm actually seeing them every 10 to 15, 16 Ks. So we're really able to stay on top of that. So very grateful that it was then and not earlier in the race. Then Simon and I went out for the 6-foot track loop. At this point, it's like 2:30 in the morning. I want to die. And not in a physical sense, guys, but like just emotionally, this whole race is feeling hard. I've probably got hormones raging as well, to be honest. And yeah, I'm like whinging my head off to him. To Simon's credit, he's just keeping me going, keeping me distracted, keeping me motivated. And we were like fiddling between, does it work better to have the pacer in front or behind? And we just kind of alternated that, which was really good. And then the sun rose and I knew that life was going to be good. And so we got into 6 foot again, so at Megalong, pretty much on track, which very pleased about. And at that point, I knew I'd have to go up Nellie's, and we swapped out to the awesome K as my pacer. And off we went. At the point where we were coming up Nellie's, I had mentioned that my goal was to do sort of a bit of a walk run along Nellie's Glen Road until we got to the proper up. We did a couple of intervals, but I really struggled with doing that. But ultimately kept moving fairly consistently. Now, we got into the climb and to the stair part of Nellie's Glen, and there is this section where you have to basically rock hop across some boulders. And 9 times out of 10, that's fine. This was the one time when it wasn't, because at that point, like my gait and like sort of my stride had shortened, and it kind of meant that some of that rock hopping was a bit challenging. That's something that also came into fruition along a bit later as well. But there was also a photographer at this point. And okay, not only am I at a section of the trail where I'm tired, like not just tired, but I've been up for over 24 hours at this point, and my brain's being quite challenged. It's a climb, and there's a photographer. So someone's watching me and wanting to capture this all on camera. And I froze and kind of fell apart because I could not see a way across the stream, across these rocks. And I burst into tears. I had to ask the photographer, please stop taking photos, because it was giving me anxiety and it was really meaning I couldn't get across. And I got halfway across and I started crying. Then the photographer came to help me, as well as obviously my pacer, because Kay was awesome. But the photographer then realised, oh, this is not just a little bit of nerves. And he helped and I got across, and yeah, there were quite a few tears shed. A little bit embarrassing in the moment, but I think ultimately it may have acted as a release, as a bit of a pressure valve, and able to help me keep going. Well, fingers crossed it did. Well, I got it done anyhow. But I got into one of the aid stations and I'm like, I was crying. And it's like, yes, a moment of weakness, but it was funny. It was that little bit of an emotional brain challenge in that moment that really was a bit too much and it tipped me over the edge. And actually, I'm going to regress for a moment. On that loop with Simon, I put a lot of the dots together. I was connecting dots going, shiver me timbers. I didn't want to drink McGovit's. What's going on? And so I put the dots together to say that I'd actually mixed my electrolytes too strong, completely put me off the taste, made me stop drinking, made me stop eating. And it meant that I needed only really plain things, nothing too salty, nothing too sweet, just really plain. So we worked on the strategy of plain water and Coca-Cola in my flasks to get me through, and then making sure that the jelly beans got in. And so my paces from that point on, their job was to say, jelly bean, jelly bean, jelly bean. And that really worked, plus the Coke and the water. At the aid stations itself, I was grabbing just a bit of fruit, so watermelon and orange. And that's how I was getting through. I'm really lucky, and I really feel like it's my fat adaptation being keto that meant that I didn't fall into a complete hole, and I was actually totally able to recover from that. So totally winning. I realized that on that loop. And so how cool is it that I could actually have that in the state of struggling, have that frame of mind to actually be problem solving, which to me, that is totally winning. So up Nellies we went, into Aquatic ahead of schedule, into Fairmont ahead of schedule. I'm literally doing things like changing t-shirts, changing shoes, just staying as fresh as possible, getting food in where I can. So again, it was mostly fruit. I think at Fairmont, I had pumpkin soup, which was great, but a lot of the food wasn't really, I was looking at it and I was literally going, yuck. I just didn't want it. I just did what I could. I wasn't getting upset about it. I was trying not to let it get me anxious. When I say trying, it was not getting me anxious. I was calm. In fact, some guys at the aid stations were saying, oh my gosh, you are so calm. And so that is the thing. Now, further to all of that, then we swapped over at Fairmont. Simon was back pacing me to QVH. And again, we've got literally ups and downs and arounds. And where he came to the forefront here, which I thought was really cool, is that he just got me super distracted. He was asking me all about my research and what I was learning. And that was a really great strategy. And again, that section was like bang on to plan. And so I got into QVH on plan. So good. At that point, I actually thought we were seeing lots of 100K runners. Now, between sort of Aquatic and QVH, there was lots of 100K runners on the single track. And what was really awesome is that what we'd learned from last year is that I need to avoid getting buffeted, because then that really affects my mental state higher. And so that's being proactive on the front foot. So my paces were behind me. And so people were coming through. We were just being really open about communication and just saying, hey, yep, we'll let you pass. Like, there's a wide section of trail up here. Can I just go an extra few steps? And like, can I just say 99% of runners were really great. I only got buffeted once, and there were really only a couple of dickheads. We had a bit of fun actually rating runners that were passing on a scale of 0 to 10 as to like what their etiquette was with passing. So that again was quite amusing and passed the time. Only one person got 10, just saying. I won't go into that, but it was pretty awesome. After QVH, I picked up K again, and actually at QVH, there were again people we knew that were doing the 100, and it was actually nice to really see them doing well themselves and say g'day. I do think I was a little bit out of it at that point. So I had some potato again at QVH, and then out we went. Now going down, down and then up. So we've got like 6Ks of down. My body was jiggling. It took me a good probably 4K to get into any kind of rhythm. So that wasn't entirely fab, but you do your best. But after the helipad, I really found a rhythm then. And then we were able to just keep going. And in fact, once I got to the sewerage works in that single trail, I'm like, yes, bring it on, bring it on. I did have a bit of head torch issues in that section because we swapped out the wrong battery, and so I ended up having to use my backup torch, and all of that going through. But yay for backup torches and yay for pacer backup torches, just saying. In the end, we got it done. But it meant that I was thinking that whole section, well, when I finish, I'm going to tell Kilner I would have been an hour faster if he would have given me the right battery for my head torch. So that was a bit of fun. And I did say that. There's actually a video on my Instagram that shows me saying that because I've been preparing it for like 2 hours to say. Then, of course, we get to the bottom of Furber. We have a pause. We prepare. Then off we go. And we'd let the 100Kers go so that I wasn't really in their way. And then 27 minutes later, I was crossing the finish line. I was able to run that finish shoot. I was like such on cloud nine. I'm like, come on, guys. Like, I know it was like 10:30 at night, but guys, they just needed to be a bit more energy. So I was prompting them and they obliged. And then I finished across the line. There was the crew. They were so excited. Dave was on the mic and he was super excited. And then we just had big hugs. Now, to be honest, at this point, I'm like, guys, I just need to go home and go to the bathroom and get all of these dirty clothes off. So that's effectively what we did after some photos. Because, yeah, don't highly recommend getting your period halfway through a miler, but we did it and we did it together. And I hope you really get the impression here that, yes, it was freaking hard, but no shit, Sherlock. And I had crew that reminded me of that and didn't care and got me through it. Because even though it was hard, there was no way we were stopping because there was no real reason to stop. It was just the brain trying to do better of me. Anyway, that is my recap. I'll probably do other videos about other things, but I don't want to make this too long. So I hope you have enjoyed it. Please pop in any questions. And will I be back next year? Well, if the sign-ups were today, I'd probably join. Just saying. All right. See you guys. You are the best.